Vitor and I are going to discuss the situation in Portugal with regard to Jewish relations. Portugal has a long-standing history of Jewish relations. We'll be discussing it also in relation to foreign relations with the state of Israel, and we'll see that there is, as we mentioned in the title, the Palestinist paradox. On the one hand, we have a state which is trying to make amends for the past. As I mentioned before, there's a long history between Portugal and the Jews, okay, going back to late antiquity up until the modern period. And Vitor is going to take us through that period in the space of an hour, and we're going to discuss that and try and analyze what's happening. Vitor, take it away. Tell us a little bit about Portuguese relations from the beginning.
Yeah, so Portugal has, as you said, we have a large history when it comes to having Jewish population within the territory. If you go now to the country, there aren't that many signs because things change radically. But if you think of the history, say from the Middle Ages, there like Jews were all over the place, and the Jews were so many that by now, um, some historians will say that a third of the population in the south, and what I mean by south is from Lisbon towards Algarve, which is the very bottom of Portugal, so next to the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, it's half-half. So a third of the population descend from the Jews. So that's quite a lot. If you think that one out of three people have Jewish blood in the south, so that's quite a lot. And in Portugal,
Indeed.
it's a small country. It's a small country. It's not like Italy or Germany or Poland, you know. So it's a huge fraction. Now, how is that reflected these days? No, it's not the same. Some people are aware of it. Some people fancy that. Some people try to disconnect from the past, or they don't want to know because there might be a price to be related to the Jews. And I would think that it's the common fear, you know, among humanity, and it's there. I believe that there's a lot of envy towards Jewish people, and that's not only in Portugal. People
Mm.
tend to think that the Jewish man is wealthy, he's good in life, things are going in the right direction, and probably he's doing something wrong because his life is in shape, you know. And people feel
Mm.
bad about it. People feel because
Right.
people tend to compare themselves to others, and when others are doing great, they just don't feel well when they look at the mirror. So I think the
In,
Portuguese are no different on that. So there's a lot of envy, you know, like when they say, okay, Portugal is still the economy it's still not the greatest, but and they compare to Israel, where you know things are very much developed, infrastructure is
mm.
impressive,
Mm.
opportunities are overwhelming.
Vitor, excuse me if I stop you for a second. Could that be the reason why the community of Belmonte, are you familiar with the story
I am,
of the
yeah.
community of Belmonte, hid their Jewish identity for centuries,
Mm.
only to be rediscovered in the early part of the 20th century with a chance meeting with a Jew who came from outside. They obviously feared very much for their own safety, even though we were in the 20th century. That's very interesting what you say. Now, looking to the modern period, do you think there is a sort of a Pavlovian reflex whereby the Jewish community there is still afraid at some level?
Yes, yeah, and there are many reasons for that. Like one is the common person who has this idea that Jews are doing great, so we must hate them. Other one is the trend that we all should be on the Palestinian sides because otherwise we are not human. We are just monsters. So there is this
Mm,
pandemic of empathy towards Palestinians that either you are with them or you are a devil. There's nothing in between, which is
mm,
appalling because there's no place for thinking, there's
mm,
no room for trying to understand what's going on. You just need to be driven by your feelings and be with the Palestinians. It's much more complex than that, you know, and you cannot just drive conclusions out of feelings. You need to stick to facts. You need to do some analysis. You need to get some data, and probably you cannot assess that using your heart. There's much more tools that you need to use to understand the situation than just be feeling pity for some photo that they take of a Palestinian baby crying. It's much more than that. Like, you cannot reduce the whole thing to a Palestinian child who cannot eat. There is much more than that.
Indeed.
So Portuguese people are being misled, and the government doesn't help. And it doesn't matter if it is the socialist or the social democratic. They are both what I call big center parties. They are just part of the system. It doesn't make any
Right.
difference, because at this point in time, if it's center left or center right, we are talking of the same. Like there are barely any difference. We switch at government, the anti-Semitism is pretty much the same.
Indeed, indeed. But from a formal point of view, also, I think anti-Semitism ended pretty late in Portugal as well. I seem to recall the episode of the so-called Portuguese Dreyfus affair concerning a gentleman called Arthur Carlos de Barros Basto. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I don't know much about it. I think we were just discussing that today, and it's just another good example of Jews not being understood in Portugal. I honestly don't know a lot about it. I think it's just a sad episode among many.
Yes. Which happened which during the Salazar period.
Yeah, so I mean, the other one that I know a bit better during the Salazar period is Aristides Sousa Mendes. Aristides Sousa Mendes was a consul who was kind of just for people out there, was kind of a Schindler for Portuguese.
That's correct. That's correct.
He
That's
tried
correct.
to save the Jews. He was a consul. He was not a consul, but he was a consul a bit later. But he was part of the government. So he was,
Right.
and he ended up as a diplomat, and he paid a huge price for that, because first you couldn't disobey the government, which, and things didn't change these days, but
Yes.
they're just more visible. They were just more visible than they are now.
Mm.
And he tried to save some Jews who wanted to just find a place where they could be themselves and
Mm.
don't need to hide or don't need to pretend there was someone else.
Mm.
He's a hero, and I'm very happy now that Israel is even naming some streets after him, and is being
Right.
recognized all over the world, because he was an
Right.
example of a human being.
Indeed. Now, tell me, what is the situation? You live in Ireland, and of course, Ireland has taken on an official level, that is, a very anti-Israel position. What is the situation of the Portuguese government?
It's a matter of time. I was actually discussing that with my father the other day, and we
Mm,
believe it's a matter of time. There will be the period where there are two options, whether or you are with the trend or you are in trouble. And most
mm,
people are cowards, and the Portuguese government is composed of cowards, and you
mm,
cannot rely on cowards because they don't have a voice, they don't have a spine, so they will
mm.
go with the heart, and they will tell whatever they need to tell. And I think it's just a matter of time. I would give it a few years, maybe 2 years, for them to recognize the state of Palestine, even though no one
Mm.
knows what are the borders, what will be the government. Like it doesn't make any sense because it's not tangible, and there are no signs of democracy in that piece of land.
Aha, indeed. Now, does this resonate with ordinary people in the street? Because probably most people have other things to think about, but the government tends to make a lot of noise about the so-called Palestinian question. Do people in the street have any feelings? Does this resonate with them, or have they been totally brainwashed?
Yeah, I'd say with the vast majority of people, yes, because if they see that what is the media is telling, they will believe is true. There's this trend that whatever thing that is on the news, it's a fact and it can't be disputed. So people would just say yes because they don't want to think about it. And if the media is telling that it's a fact, then let's take it for granted. And unfortunately, it's not only the media; it's also the
Hmm.
universities. It's also the academia. It's a huge confluence of people with bad intentions. And as I said, there is a pandemic of cowardice, and people are not
mm,
to oppose because they
mm.
know their lives are at stake. When I mean by lives, of course, they are not going to be assassinated, but their lives are going to be in big trouble. Like you can
Indeed, indeed.
lose your
Their
job
livelihood,
because
let us say their
yeah,
livelihoods, they'll have
yes,
difficulty
yes,
getting employment, and they could be even blacklisted by
yes.
banks, the victims of cancel culture.
Yeah,
So
by
tell me,
banks. And
mm,
then what is funny is that the people say, "Oh, no, I'm going to do that because I don't want the bank to go after my savings." But then
mm,
at the same time, they say that the banks are with the Jews, which is a huge
mm.
contradiction.
Indeed, 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 indeed. And this is why we've called this little conversation the Palestinist paradox. And I'd like to come back to that because on the one hand, the Portuguese state has offered citizenship to Jews of Iberian origin, that is, the descendants of those who were expelled from the Iberian Peninsula subsequent to the various decrees in Spain and Portugal. How does this sit with Portuguese people? On the one hand, they're offering citizenship, and on the other hand, they are pursuing a policy which is detrimental to world Jewry. Let's be perfectly
Yeah.
frank.
So this bill was passed with the center-right party, and
Right.
back when they were in power,
Mm,
when they're back, when they're in power again. But this was
mm,
maybe like 10 years ago, just to make it simple.
mm,
And I don't know the background of that, but I would say that there were some interest. I don't think they did that out of sympathy or with
mm.
you know
Right, right.
with a positive intention. Like
Mm,
most politicians only do things when there is something there for themselves.
mm,
I don't know exactly what it was. I don't want to speculate it, but
mm,
there was some criticism from the other party, especially from the left, because we all know that the left hates Israel because they identify Israel with capitalism. And capitalism needs to be destroyed because
mm,
we need to go back to some uh, egalitarian utopia, which doesn't make any sense. But
mm-hmm.
and part of that program is to tear down the state of Israel because they believe that if
Right,
Israel is
right.
doing well, it's because they are stealing. You cannot do well with ethics. Like
Mm,
from a left-wing perspective, everyone that is making
mm.
good living is committing a crime, which is totally wrong. And there are people committing
Indeed.
crimes, of course, and that can happen whether you are doing well or not. But the fact that you are improving your life standards, it doesn't mean that you are taking anything from others.
That's perfectly true. Once upon a time in Europe, there was a left which was sympathetic to Israel. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. For example, there were two great watersheds, 1956 and 1967. This coincides with the fact that Israel wins defensive wars. Then the left slowly but surely turns against Israel. Bear in mind that Israel was, to all intents and purposes, a socialist state up until the rise of the Likud government in 1977. So is there no remnant of sympathy within the left
No,
for it's that has totally
not,
been totally
not on the left.
effaced?
Not on the left.
Right,
Like, all their sympathy is fake, is plastic. It's not made of real feelings. So
right.
they wouldn't have any solidarity with people that are in trouble. And the people that are in trouble are the Israelis. I mean, there
Mm,
are Palestinians, of course, that are suffering, and they probably are the biggest victims out of that
mm,
because they are, what I would call a crossfire. And maybe all
mm.
they want is to have a good living,
Yes,
and they cannot
right.
because if they want to oppose Hamas, they'll be beheaded immediately. But the
Yes.
left doesn't see that. The left does just see what is good for them and what serves their political program is to tell that there is an oppressor, and that oppressor is Israel because it's
Mm,
linked to the states and this part of the West, and the West is responsible for all the crimes, and we need to
mm.
somehow tear them apart.
Mm, 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 mm. And tell me, is that what about the coverage in the Portuguese media? Is that blanket support for Palestinism, or is it, or can one hear the odd voice out of the chorus?
Well, if we talk about the media, I would rather separate the mainstream media from the alternative media. But the mainstream
Mm,
media is disgusting. They are all on the Palestinian side because it's they want to be part of the trend. They are not journalists, they're agents. They are just there
Mm,
to report what needs to be reported. They are probably being paid and being sponsored by people who don't have good intentions. So they are just there writing down or doing interviews with a specific purpose. They are not doing their jobs with the intention of telling facts or report reality. They are just there serving a
mm,
narrative, and Israel is not part of the program. Israel is seen as the enemy, so the mainstream media is appalling from all the angles. Now, on the
mm,
alternative media, it's a bit different, and luckily we live now in a time and age when there are more independent journalists or independent or what I call journalist citizens who just so like ourselves we have a laptop, we have a webcam, we have a microphone, we have our network, and we try to tell things that are different from what we are told from the media. There are
mm.
more and more people like that, and I think it's something that is being expanding at a level that probably the mainstream media is not recognizing. I think we are more and
Mm.
more than they think. The issue is that if you do things differently, as we were just saying, we might pay a price, and the price is
Indeed,
very very heavy. We can lose our jobs. We can be in social trouble, and most people don't have the resources, to oppose the system. And I understand some of them.
indeed,
There are
indeed,
families to be fed, and you need to be very mindful. So you kind of need to do some work with the resources before you express your voice out there. And
indeed.
I would say that we are more than they think. Just some people remain silent because they are very afraid of the consequences. Now, in the mainstream, there are also few figures that are now having the courage to tell that they are on the Israeli side, or at least they are not just telling that Palestine is right all the time. They are trying to be balanced. And I think it's also a consequence of the alternative media um, echoing on people.
Indeed. Um, what about Portuguese alignment with the position of the EU? Does it buy into that totally, lock, stock, and barrel? Is it hook, line, and sinker, as we say?
Yeah, yeah, they have to. I mean, the Portuguese government is very much pro EU. We just switched government a few months ago, and nothing changed when it comes to the way we collaborate with the EU. We will never say anything different from the EU is saying. I think we are one of the most pro-European, pro-EU. It's a bit different being pro-Europe and being
That's it.
pro-EU.
That's it. I myself believe that the EU is an anti-European endeavor. I'm of that opinion, having analyzed the situation. I believe there are many analogies. It's anti-Israel because it's anti-European as
Yes,
well. Yeah,
anti-West. Yeah, I would say the enemy is among us, which is very scary. Because one thing
mm,
is when the barbaric tribes are just around and trying to get in.
indeed.
Another thing when they're already infiltrated and we don't know who they are. We don't know who they are. Some people don't know who they are. To me,
Mm.
it's obvious, but they are already among us. So they have all the means to destroy us, and it might be a bit too late, or if it is already late, we just need to put our thoughts together and act back.
Indeed, I very much subscribe to what you're saying. It is a two-pronged attack from within and without, with these waves of uncontrolled migrants arriving in Europe, and of course, a political element which aids and abets this clandestine immigration.
Yes, yes, and I believe that the what I call the invasion,
Indeed,
just to
indeed.
paraphrase,
It is a more appropriate word. You are right. It
I'm
is
just
it
paraphrasing Victor Orban. It's not my
No, no, it is a more appropriate term to use. It is more akin to
yeah.
an
So
invasion.
I
It's more
believe that
akin
the
to an
invasion,
invasion.
in a way, it can help Israel because people will experience to an extent what Israel is experiencing.
Indeed, yes,
Territory, and maybe
yes.
they will think, okay, this is something that I can now feel in my neighborhood, or maybe I'm a bit concerned when my daughter goes to school. Maybe that can be related to how Israel is living their day-to-day life. So maybe I think that is helping quite a lot. Like if you like, it's very funny when you talk to, for instance, the Indians. The Indians know what's happening in Israel because they are Pakistan just across the border.
That's right.
Most Indians are pro-Israel. It's no wonder because they know that the threat is just there, and they need
That's
to be
right.
very careful. And they have no problem when a Pakistani gets in India that this guy needs to have a paper. He needs to tell where he is going every day. He needs to tell the authorities where is he heading, what is he doing, who is he meeting, and no one's saying it's racism. It's just a matter of protecting their own people.
Indeed, indeed. Some European countries have taken a somewhat similar line. I'm sure you're aware of the Visegrad Group.
Yeah, actually, I lived in Hungary and Poland for some time, about 5 years between the two countries, and the approach toward those things is very different. You know, they have no problem welcoming Arabs, but they are very strict when it comes to accepting people coming from cultures that are by all means different from the
Mm,
native population. They will be extremely mindful to select who can come in and do what because there is a lot of problems when it comes to integration. Not everyone has the greatest intention. Some people are just what I call economical migrants. They just come here to get some social welfare benefits. And it's not that the locals don't do it, but it's very different when it's someone that was born and raised in the country versus someone who just arrived.
yes,
And
yes, yes.
you know who they
Somebody
are.
who doesn't have a connection with the country, obviously one views that person in a different way. Of course, if you're a local, it's one thing, and the people who come from abroad, it's another thing. After all, your relatives have in some way contributed to the system. You're part of the social fabric. Even in the best case scenarios, when somebody comes from abroad, when you have large immigration, even let's say from people who are relatively compatible, it still places stress on the social fabric. When you have people coming from totally different colors, the wear and tear is certainly greater. And when you have aggressive elements, people who want to subvert the host countries, then I think we're looking at a doomsday scenario.
Yeah, 100%, Mark, 100%. Mark. If you compare, for instance, the migration coming from Arab countries versus the Chinese or the
Indeed.
the Thai, for instance, like most Thai and Chinese who come to Europe, they come to work. Like I never heard uh, advice of not don't go to Chinatown. It's dangerous.
Of
Now
course, of
you
course,
can
of
just go
course.
there. People
Or
are
the
working.
Jewish immigrations to Britain and
Yeah,
France in the past. Nobody says don't go into Golders Green or Stamford Hill.
yeah.
One cannot deny the evidence. One
Yes,
cannot
yes.
deny the
So,
evidence.
what is funny is like all these people who are, oh, if you say that the Muslim neighborhood is dangerous, it's racist or it's xenophobic. But then, let's say if you go on these tourist web pages on the internet, where they tell you what to do,
Mm,
when to go. Some of them they will say, yeah, this suburb maybe it's not recommendable for females. And it's
mm,
like even Wikipedia is saying that, and Wikipedia is the wokest page on the internet,
mm.
which is hard
Indeed,
because there are a lot of folk wants to be the wokest one.
indeed.
Yeah,
Hmm. It's my opinion. I have always felt that Palestinism is the retrovirus that has weakened the European system. And we see a confluence of all those forces which are inimical to Western Judeo-Christian civilization. They all come together, and they're creating a critical mass which is undermining these societies. I've been saying it for a long time that essentially Palestinism is a fig leaf for fundamentalist Islam. And not only that, it is the greatest enemy of decent and moderate Muslims more than anything else. It's the most oppressive ideology, most oppressive and to the detriment of Muslims themselves, which blocks them from any kind of progress socially, spiritually, economically, any way of integrating into the host society. It simply causes havoc.
yeah, I 100%. And I would even say that there is more sympathy from the West towards Palestinians than there is from the uh, the Arabs. Like the Arabs, they don't care. It just when it serves their purpose. You know, it's us who are just feeling sorry.
You've
Just
said
like,
something. You've said something very important there. It is the Arab states that have created this
yes,
monster, from which they are now distancing themselves,
yeah,
and
100%. Yeah,
and they refuse to take any responsibility.
yeah,
And the Europeans are not holding them to account. But there's also another element in this because I believe Palestinism also serves another purpose. It enables traditional anti-Semites, if you will, to launder their deep-seated anti-Semitism, to
yeah,
make it respectable, to make it mainstream. And I believe it is now mainstream.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree, and it's one of those things that the only option you have to be well seen by others is to be with the Palestinians. Otherwise, you are being seen as a bad person. Like there's no
Mm,
place for reasoning. It's all about feelings. It's all about sympathy. And
mm,
as I said, it's not something that we can analyze with our heart. We need facts, data,
mm.
and and thought.
Indeed, indeed. Tell me about your trips to Israel, about your it's because well, we want to speak about the heart as well, not just about the head. You came here obviously because we are flesh and blood, we have sentiments, and we connect also with our feelings. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I've been to Israel now I think six times, five or six. I think six. Yeah, let's say
Right.
five or six times. First one was in 2009 or 2010. I can't remember now. That was actually uh, that served as inspiration for if I can show this book called
Indeed.
Israel's Bell. So this is a book that I this is a Portuguese edition. There's the Brazilian edition. Fortunately, it's not translated into English or Hebrew or any other language as of now. I'm looking for that. Uh,
Indeed. But you've put them in the chat so our viewers can see the titles of these books in the
yeah,
chat, and I'm sure they'll find them very interesting when they're translated into English or Italian
hopefully
or
soon. Hopefully soon.
yeah, hopefully it's
So
coming soon. Yeah.
what I can say about my first trip to Israel is that it was mind blowing, and it was also a learning to me as a person. And
Mm,
I'm just going to tell an episode. I remember being on a on I was in where was that? It was Tel Aviv. I was in Tel Aviv on the beach. I was not exactly on the sand. I was just by the sea. You know, just
mm,
walking. And I was very afraid because I was much younger. I was still I was not that aware of uh, how much the media is manipulating and brainwashing people. So I thought
mm.
that Israel was very dangerous, which is not the case. I just want to tell people it's not really dangerous. It's for sure safer than most places in Europe these days and the United States.
Indeed,
So I was
indeed.
very afraid that Israel could be attacked and any time. I didn't know what to do because you know, my understanding of Hebrew is very limited. I don't know if I could save myself with English. And I remember at some point seeing some airplanes flying over the beach.
Mm,
And it's like, why are there like airplanes flying over the beach? Why is that? And if I would be in a beach, say in Portugal, in Spain, in Greece, I wouldn't care. I thought it would be some mud, some I don't know, something normal. And I knew the airport was very far, so I thought maybe it's just the enemy. Maybe the Iran is just invading. I was this naive and paranoid. But then what I did was I'm going to look at people and see their reaction. So if they are not afraid, then it's me, you know, because people are here every day. They know what is a threat. I'm just someone who arrived, and people were getting on with their lives. They were, playing rackets. They were
mm,
swimming. They were hugging. They were eating, drinking. And then I realized that the best thing to understand what's going on sometimes is not your head. You are looking at others. So it's
mm,
a lesson to me as a human being because how could that be that everyone was distracted and I was noticing that the Iranians were coming in? Like, who am
mm,
I? So it was a good lesson for me, and I went back a few times, and I was very impressed with the Israeli resilience. I really admire the fact that every time there is an attack, let's say in a cafe or in a bar, the day after that place is crowded, which I think is a huge demonstration of solidarity and also of resistance for all the
Indeed.
all the attacks that Israel is facing. So they go back to that place. They tell the owner that he's not alone. They're also sending a message to the Arabs that that people are together and they're making a stand for the country. And for me, it's mind blowing how Israelis can live when all the countries want to annihilate them.
You raise a very important point. Israel is indeed about life, and you see the difference. It's palpable. When tourists arrive here, they notice immediately how many children there are.
Mm.
Compare that to the major centers in Europe, where there's a clear lack of children. And in Israel, there's a project. Israel is projected towards the future. People feel that they have to transmit something, that they're custodians of something. And this is very much something that is lacking in Europe, where very often, certainly in Italy, people have very few children.
Yeah.
Their main ambitions for many years, and I spent part of my young adulthood in Israel, was simply having a good time as if there were no tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's simply carpe diem, living for the moment, and not about a project that involves children and the future. As the custodians of something bequeathed to us by our parents and something which we have to hand on to something else. It's very much a case in many countries of turning off the lights and closing the door. Israel's very different in that sense. And tourists whom I guide, they notice it immediately. There's a life, there's a there's a vibrancy here that in Europe no longer exists.
Yeah, I would agree again that there's perspective, there is some sense of direction in Israel that we lack, and I think it makes a huge difference in the atmosphere because you can clearly see that Israel it's developing. There is a vision. It's not just the day to day. No, there is
Indeed.
some program, and people are trying to act in a way that that program will work out. Whereas Europe it's lost, and if there are children in Europe, they are not European. That's another thing.
That's it. That's it. That's it. That's very true what you say. That's very true. So what's the solution to this, Vitor? How do you see Europe coming out of this? Because it would be a tragedy if we were to simply let Europe die. There must be a reaction at some
Look,
point.
I'm I'm the I'm the optimistic type. So when I see these crises, when I see this drama, when I see this nihilism, I believe that the civilization will heal by itself. I think we will reach a point that, or we disappear, or things will be rebuilt. So I truly think that the civilization will find a way. At some point, it might take some time. I don't know if it's going to be in my lifetime or not, but there will be the period where things will be that bad that somehow we need
Turn
to
a corner.
yes, yeah, we need
Turn
to
a
come forward.
corner.
Now I don't
In
know how. Unfortunately, I don't know how. I don't know the formula, but I truly believe that nature and human nature they tend to find a solution when there's no other way than finding a solution. So I think sometimes crises are necessary for us to find.
Yes,
So it
that's
might
true.
never be
Crisis,
the case.
indeed, there are an opportunities for us to grow. A crisis is a situation for us to grow. Indeed, indeed. I see the solution, and I say this as a Jew. I believe that Europe needs to rediscover its Christian roots. What do you say about that?
That's essential. That's essential, Marco. That's essential because like if you don't know who we are, we don't know where are we going. It's
Mm,
that simple. If you
indeed,
and the problem is that these woke organizations they are just trying to wipe out the past, or maybe not wipe out. They are just trying to rewrite it that people won't know what happened before they came to this planet. They don't know their history. They don't know how we arrive here, or the only thing they know that we have been doing bad
Mm.
things. So we, the Europeans, the Westerns, are responsible for everything bad that is going on in the world. And maybe we're responsible for some of it because everyone has done bad things at some point in life. But
Indeed.
it's much wider than what they are saying. We are not just causing problems and issues to the others. We actually, if you look back, we are responsible to probably the most developed open society that ever existed. So we should be very proud of that. So I think we need to revisit what we did. We need to be proud of that and maybe get inspired. And now things have changed. Maybe there are different needs. There are different problems. But if you look back, maybe we can get this spark.
Indeed, indeed. I think there's a lot to be proud of, and there's a lot to be inspired by. Let us face it. I mean, the immigration we see goes in one direction. Basically, it goes towards the developed Western world, and not in the other direction. There must be a reason for that. People seek a better a better standard of living, a situation where they have greater rights, and it's something that they don't find in their countries of origin.
Yeah, I truly believe that. I don't know. Maybe it will take maybe say two generations for things to um, go back to the right direction. I think we need to think. We need to.
Mm.
There is. It don't happen maybe the next 10, 20 years, but at some point we need to think. Look, either we just get rid of ourselves, we gave up on who we are, and we just let it go, or we put our act together and then we build something remarkable. I think there are signs of that. I think
There are
people
signs
are
of that.
waking up.
I sense it too. Yes, yes. We need to reconstitute the immune system, first of all.
Yeah,
The immune system has been under attack with all the attendant maladies that afflict the social sphere. Coming back to slightly less philosophical considerations, I'd like to ask your opinion of the gentleman who's the Secretary General of the United Nations.
yeah. If there are reasons for me not to be proud of Portugal these days, he is one of them.
Hmm.
Uh, I think I said it in my podcast. He's a complete idiot. I don't want to sound too harsh in this podcast, but he's a complete idiot, and I'm being nice when I say complete idiot.
You're being very
Other
nice.
terms, yeah, I could say a very ugly word here, but I'm being polite.
We don't say ugly words, do we?
And I think he's just an agent. He's an agent of the narrative. He's just there making a career. He's
I'd
an
like to pick you up on that because I think that's very important. I think we have to say that the elites in Europe and the governments and the states in Europe have been complicit in what has been going on in the Middle East.
Yep.
I never tire of restating this. The funds that are supplied to the Palestinist Authority, the pay for slay policy of this government, it comes from somewhere, and it's not generated locally because they basically have no economy, so to speak of. It's money donated by European nations in the full knowledge that it is financing terrorism, that it's offering stipends to the families of murderers. So, to a great extent, we have to say that European governments have, for a very long time, been complicit in this Palestinist project,
Yeah,
this
very much.
this genocidal project. Because when we speak about genocide, we must really point the finger where it should be pointed. The Europeans have been aiding and abetting a genocidal project. I'm not talking about the people. I'm talking about the elites, the governments have been aiding and abetting a genocidal project. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I fully subscribe what you just said. I think we are responsible for what's going on in the Middle East, not only in the Middle East, but over the world. We have the we still have the upper hand, even though we look fragile. I think at the end of the day, it's always down to the West. I think I don't know how much, how many years will be like that, but I think we still have some position of power. Unfortunately, we're not using in the right way. We are being suicidal with these moves because we've been partnering with terrorists, with people with no ethic, with people with no morals, and there is no sense of leadership. We do this because it serves some elites who are
Are
just.
you trying to tell me President Biden is not a leader? Are you insinuating?
Well, I don't know. I think he's a ghost. I wouldn't say a ghost can be a leader. So I'm sorry.
It's
If I say
quite a
ghost, I don't say a leader. It's more of a scary movie, and I'm not a fan of scary movies myself.
it's quite astonishing, isn't it? It's like watching it's a caricature of those programs that used to come out of the United States in the 1960s, these Batman and Robin things where you had these caricatures and these peculiar scenarios. It's quite astounding, to say
Yeah,
the least.
and his establishment, he is like 100% establishment. There's nothing of him that can be uh, challenging. When it
Mm,
comes to how things are going, he cannot just say
mm,
we are going this direction. Maybe we can divert. No, it's
mm,
just to press a button and obey. So how can you trust a leader who is just an agent? So
mm,
I think the US itself needs someone who is not part of
mm.
the establishment. He needs
Yeah.
someone who is independent, who is not there to make a career, who is just there for the country, and
Mm,
has a great sense of humor. And for sure, that's not Biden. I don't need to know who is that person. I think I already said it without saying it.
mm.
So
I seem to get the message here that you believe that indeed. Let's talk a little bit about, we have a few minutes left. Let's talk a little bit about Ireland. Ireland has a particularly aggressive attitude towards Israel. One would think that it shared a border and that there was some territorial bone of contention. What's your understanding of what's happening in Ireland? It certainly is very strange.
yeah.
I grew up in Ireland, as you know, and the people there were perfectly decent. They were certainly no more hostile to the Jews than anywhere else. Less hostile, probably. A real sense of decency. Of course, I haven't lived in Ireland for a long time, but what's your understanding?
Well, I think we need to separate the government from the people. I think
Hmm.
the government it's really anti-Semitic because that's the trend. If the trend will
Hmm.
be, I don't know, anti-Chinese, then they'll be anti-Chinese. They are
Mm,
just the obeying type, so I wouldn't rely on them. They believe that being anti-Semitic serves their purpose, and their purpose is to remain in power and to
mm,
profit out of that. So
mm,
they are just being anti-Semitic because they believe that it suits their interests. Now,
mm,
when it comes to people, I think it's a bit different. I think Irish people don't really care. All they want, with all the respect, all they want is Gaelic football, guitars, and pints. So
mm,
they're interested in politics that much. I don't find a country that much interest in politics as, for instance, Portugal or Spain, where I also lived. Uh,
mm,
but unfortunately, with what's going with the massive presence of social media, everyone is very much politicized these days, and that's
mm,
not only in Ireland, because people have access to RTE and other sources of misinformation. So they watch it
mm,
when they are on the tram, they watch it when they are on the bus, they watch it when they are between meals, and they need to entertain themselves. And I think back in the days, people would just run to the pub or walk by the sea and wouldn't be that much in touch with uh, these bad sources of information
mm,
like RTE, and that probably is increasing the number of anti-Semitic individuals
mm,
among the average person. But that's the only reason. I don't think that at their core Irish people are anti-Semitic. Like I barely met a person. I think I didn't meet like anyone.
Indeed, that's my impression. That's my
But it's mostly. I mean, they will just say that with the Palestinians because it looks that uh,
right.
they are good. That looks good at the eyes of others. That's it.
Indeed.
Not from their heart.
Yes, yes. It's mostly the chattering classes.
Yes, yes.
Indeed. Where were we? We were talking about the situation, the Irish situation, and the Irish society is undergoing quite a change. I've been watching the protests recently, and the protests are very much against this elite, which have been projecting their vision of a future Ireland. I see some wind. I sense winds of change in Ireland, and maybe it'll have a positive effect on the so-called perceptions of the palestinist question. What are your views on that?
Yeah, again, I would agree with you 100%. I think it's a reflection of the independent media echoing in people's minds. I think there's more than people like ourselves expressing their views and not being afraid of the consequences and telling to others what was going on
Mm,
to at least reflect. They don't need to necessarily agree with us, but at least they can have a second thought about what's
mm,
going on. So I think those protests that you see on the street are a repercussion of people having access to the different points of view and people thinking that maybe what art is telling is not exactly the way it is. There are some things that are distorted and they do that to serve the elites. And that's just the media. Then the other thing is that people go out and some parts of Dublin and maybe even some parts of Ireland, mostly in Dublin, they don't feel safe anymore. And the reason why
mm,
they don't feel safe anymore because there are people around with bad intentions. Some of them are not
mm,
Irish, or the vast majority are not Irish, and they
mm,
never know what you can expect from them. And
mm,
people are very cool. People are very friendly to the point that they feel that they need to be careful when they go out and what they are doing and they believe that it doesn't make sense because some people
mm.
had a very peaceful life until
Indeed.
maybe
Mm,
few years
yeah.
ago, and they don't want that.
Right, right. So there is an opportunity here to expose other people to different views. I see this as a window of opportunity. Every cloud has a silver lining, as we say in Israel.
Yes, yeah, 100%. I think we just need to express our voices,
Yes,
make sure that we reach out as many people as possible, and communication is key.
indeed, indeed. Very good. Vitor, I'd like to thank you so much for this wonderful conversation, and I look forward to having future conversations with you.
Yeah, likewise, it was a great pleasure talking to you, and I'm open for another chat.
Very good, very good. We'll try and organize that as soon as possible. So I'll take this opportunity to sign off with all to say au revoir to all our viewers. We look forward to seeing you participate soon as well. Thank you once more, Vitor,
Thanks,
and
Marco. Talk soon.
and I look forward to seeing you soon. All the best.